Hey guys! Tonight we're rolling west, slowly, creek by creek, into the long dust-filled nightmare politely known as the Oregon Trail. You're standing in a frontier town that smells like mud, livestock, and optimism, staring at a wooden wagon that's supposed to carry your entire future across nearly 2,000 miles of land that does not care about you at all. And honestly, judging by what you've packed and what you haven't, you probably wouldn't survive this. But let's not spoil the mood just yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wagon groans softly as you tighten the last rope. Wood complains against wood, iron rings tap nervously, and the canvas cover flaps like it already regrets being involved. Around you, other families are doing the same quiet dance, checking lists, shifting sacks, pretending this is all very reasonable. Children chase each other through the dirt. Oxen flick their tails, unaware they've just been signed up for months of unpaid labor. This moment, this exact pause before leaving, is one of the most common scenes in American westward migration history. Thousands of immigrants gathered in river towns along the Missouri, convinced that preparation and determination could tame distance, disease, and geography. The trail, on paper, looked manageable: a line, a route, a promise. You climb into the wagon to adjust the load and immediately realize something is wrong. There is either too much stuff or not enough space. Probably both. You brought furniture, didn't you? A chair, maybe a small table, something that made sense in a house. You stare at it now, already imagining the moment weeks from now when you'll trade it for a handful of flour and feel like you made a smart deal. A well-known historical fact is that most immigrants overloaded their wagons at the start. The recommended weight was around 1.000 to 1.500 pounds. But fear of scarcity led people to bring far more. The trail had a way of correcting this mistake. Slowly, relentlessly, item by item. You jumped down, dusting your hands, and glanced toward the river. The Missouri flows wide and calm, reflecting the sky like it's nothing more than a decorative feature. But crossing it marks a psychological line. On the far bank is not just land, it's commitment. Once you cross, turning back becomes expensive, embarrassing, and increasingly impractical. A lesser-known detail is that many people abandoned the journey within the first few weeks. Broken wagons, sick animals, and the sudden realization that walking beside a wagon all day is very different from imagining it convinced some to retreat early. Those who stayed learned quickly that the trail doesn't test you all at once. It applies pressure gently, day after day, until something gives. Someone nearby laughs too loudly. Someone else prays quietly. You hear advice being exchanged. How to grease axles. How to avoid bad water. How to keep spirits up. Most of it is well-meaning. Some of it is dangerously wrong. There are no experts here. Just people with confidence. Historians still debate how much emigrants truly understood the risks of the journey. Diaries suggest a mix of awareness and denial. People knew others had died, but believed preparation, faith, or sheer willpower would spare them. It's a very human kind of optimism. The sort that whispers, "Yes, but not us." You take one last look back at the town. Solid buildings, wells, shops, doctors, everything you're about to pretend you don't need. The sound of a hammer echoes somewhere. Life goes on here, perfectly content without you. Then the call comes. Time to move. Oxen lean into their yokes. Wheels begin to turn. The wagon lurches forward, not dramatically, just enough to let you know there's no ceremonial music for this moment. The trail begins quietly, almost politely, like it's easing you in before showing its true personality later. Your feet find the dirt beside the wagon. Because you're already walking. Riding is for children, the sick, and people who don't yet understand what's coming. The sun climbs. Dust rises. The line of wagons stretches ahead and behind like a moving village made of wood and hope. And somewhere, beneath the excitement, beneath the nerves, a very small, very honest thought settles in. This is only the beginning, and the trail hasn't even started being cruel yet. The river waits for you with the patience of something that has seen far too many hopeful plans come and go. The Missouri doesn't rush, it sprawls, wide, brown, and deceptively calm. It slides past the town as if unaware that it's about to become the last familiar boundary of your old life. You stand on the bank and listen. Water laps softly against wood. Ropes creak. Oxen snort, uneasy about stepping onto something that floats. The air smells damp and green, thick with mud and vegetation. This is not a dramatic farewell scene. No trumpets. No speeches. Just families quietly realizing that once the wagon reaches the far side, the word home becomes something you talk about in the past tense. A well-known historical fact is that most Oregon Trail journeys began with a river crossing like this one, often over the Missouri or Platte. These crossings weren't just logistical hurdles, they were psychological ones. On the near side were towns, ferries, supply depots, and doctors. On the far side was less of everything. You watch as another wagon goes first. It rolls onto a ferry, basically a wide wooden platform with rails, and immediately looks less confident about its life choices. The ferry operator shouts instructions that sound reassuring but feel improvised. The river carries them out, slow and steady, while everyone on shore holds their breath for no good reason. The ferry reaches the opposite bank without incident, and there's a ripple of relieved murmuring. Your turn. You guide the oxen forward. They hesitate, hooves sliding slightly on wet planks, eyes wide with suspicion. You whisper encouragement like they understand English. Or at least optimism. The wagon shifts its weight. Boards groaning. And suddenly you're floating. The sensation is wrong. The wagon is supposed to roll, not drift. Your stomach tightens as the current nudges the ferry sideways. The town behind you already looks smaller, like it's politely stepping out of the conversation. A lesser-known detail is that river crossings were one of the earliest sources of loss on the trail, not just of people, but of supplies. Wagons tipped, ropes snapped, barrels of food vanished into muddy water. Sometimes no one died, but the damage was done anyway. A wet sack of flour doesn't look dramatic, but it quietly shortens your future. You glance down at the water. It's opaque, unreadable. You can't see the bottom, which feels unfair. Modern you would check a depth chart or a weather app. Trail you just stares and hopes gravity behaves. Someone near you jokes that once you cross, there's no turning back. It gets a few laughs. The nervous kind. Everyone knows that's not entirely true. People can turn back, but saying it out loud feels like tempting the trail. The ferry bumps against the far bank with a dull thud. Planks are lowered. The oxen step forward, relieved to be back on solid ground, and the wagon rolls off with a jolt that rattles your teeth. You're across. You turn around. The town is still there. The buildings haven't vanished. Smoke still curls from chimneys. It looks normal, and that's the strange part. You half expect some kind of visual cue, thunder, ominous lighting, a sign reading "Abandon all comfort. Ye who cross." Instead, the world simply continues. That normalcy makes the goodbye sharper. A woman near you wipes her eyes quickly, like she's embarrassed by them. A man stares at the town a little too long before snapping at his oxen to move. Children ask when they'll see grandparents again. No one answers clearly. Historians still debate how much emotional strain these early departures caused compared to later hardships. Some argue that physical suffering dominated memory. Others point out that diaries often linger on these early moments, the last sight of civilization. The first true separation, as if the emotional weight set the tone for everything that followed. You walk beside the wagon again, the rhythm already settling in. Step, step, wheel creak, step. The trail on this side of the river looks almost friendly. Grass grows thick. The ground is relatively flat. Birds hop along the edges, unimpressed by your ambition. It's easy, right now, to feel reassured. You hear someone say, "If it's like this the whole way, we'll be fine." It's said with a smile. Someone else nods. You almost believe it yourself. Then you notice the small things. A wagon a few lengths ahead has stopped. One wheel is tilted at a bad angle. The axle already complaining. A group gathers. Tools come out. Voices tighten. It's not dramatic yet, but it's a preview. The trail doesn't wait for repairs. It simply continues, and you either keep up or fall behind. A lesser-known fact is that many trail journals mention the first breakdowns happening almost immediately, often within days of departure. Wagons built for farm roads struggled under constant motion and weight. Every mile was a stress test. The sun climbs higher. The breeze fades. Dust begins to rise, fine and persistent, coating boots, hems, and the inside of your mouth. You swallow and taste earth. Your throat already feels dry. and it's barely midday. You realize something else too. The line of wagons stretches ahead of you farther than you expected. This isn't a small group. It's a moving corridor of people, animals, and hope, all funneling into the same narrow idea of a better life. And behind you, more wagons are still crossing the river, committing themselves one by one. Another quietly modern comparison floats through your mind. It's like leaving reliable Wi-Fi and realizing you won't have a signal again for months. Except instead of notifications, you're losing doctors, stores, and backup plans. By late afternoon, camp is called. The wagons circle in a rough oval. Animals are unyoked. Fires sparked. The smell of cooking bacon drifts through the air, comforting and familiar. For a moment, it feels almost like a picnic. But as you sit and eat, your feet throb, your shoulders ache. The day wasn't long by trail standards, and already your body is sending polite warnings. You look back once more, though the river is no longer visible. This side of it feels quieter, bigger, less defined. The first boundary is behind you now, not marked by a fence or a sign, but by a simple truth settling into your bones. You have left the known world, and the trail, patient as ever, has finally begun to close the distance between you and everything you don't yet understand. Morning arrives without ceremony, no alarm, no gentle easing into consciousness, just light, cold, and the immediate realization that the ground is much harder than you remember from your bed back home. Your body unfolds itself from the night with a series of quiet complaints: stiff knees, a tight lower back, shoulders that feel like they spent the night arguing with gravity. Around you, camp stirs. Fires are coaxed back to life. Someone coughs. Someone else mutters that it's too early for this kind of life choice. The oxen stand patiently, tails swishing, already resigned to another day of forward motion they didn't consent to. This is where the optimism starts to thin. A well-known historical fact is that the first weeks of the Oregon Trail were often the most psychologically jarring. Not because conditions were at their worst yet, but because expectations collided with reality. People left towns imagining a long but manageable journey. What they found instead was repetition, endless walking, endless dust, endless small problems that refused to stay small. You eat breakfast standing up. There's no table now, no chair. No sense in sitting too long anyway. Bacon grease coats your fingers. Coffee, if you're lucky, tastes faintly of smoke and grit. You swallow it gratefully, knowing this may be one of the last times the routine feels even remotely familiar. The wagons start rolling again, and you fall into step beside yours. The trail stretches forward like a suggestion rather than a road. Two shallow ruts pressed into grass and dirt by those who came before. It doesn't look threatening. That's part of the problem. Within the first hour, you hear the sound. A sharp crack, then a groan of wood under stress. A wagon ahead lurches. One wheel bending at an angle no wheel should ever attempt. People rush in. Someone swears. Someone else insists it can be fixed. Tools appear. Hands work quickly, but there's an urgency in the air now. This isn't just an inconvenience, it's a warning. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how common early wagon failures were. Often within days of departure, wagons built for farm use struggled under constant load and motion. Axles heated, wheels warped, bolts loosened. Every breakdown stole time, energy, and morale all at once. You wait. Everyone waits. The line compresses, then stretches again. The sun climbs higher, and with it the heat. Dust rises with every step, coating your boots, your calves, the inside of your nose. Breathing feels drier now, like the air itself is rationing moisture. By midday, your feet ache in a deep, spreading way that doesn't fade when you stop moving. It's the kind of pain that feels personal, as if your body is offended by the distance you're asking of it. You shift your weight from foot to foot, trying to find a rhythm that hurts less. You don't find one. There's a quiet moment when you realize something important. You will be walking like this almost every day for months. Not riding, walking. Modern, you might think of a long walk as a wellness activity. Trail you is discovering that walking 8 to 15 miles a day, on uneven ground, beside a moving wagon, while managing animals and supplies, is less fitness goal and more slow negotiation with your skeleton. The land rolls gently, almost kindly. Grass waves in the breeze. Wildflowers dot the edges of the trail. Birds dart and sing, clearly unaware they're part of a historical hardship montage. It would be beautiful if you weren't so tired already. Someone near you jokes that once your feet go numb, it gets easier. They laugh. You're not sure if it's a joke. A well-known historical event tied to this phase of the journey is the gradual scattering of wagon trains as pace differences emerged. Faster groups pulled ahead, slower ones lagged. The neat, hopeful caravan of departure slowly stretched into a long, uneven chain, with gaps growing wider every day. You feel that separation beginning already. A wagon behind you struggles with a sick ox. One ahead seems to glide along effortlessly. Its animals strong, its wheels obedient. Comparison creeps in quietly. Why them? Why not us? By afternoon, the heat settles into your shoulders like a weight. Sweat darkens your clothes, then dries, leaving salt behind. Your mouth tastes stale no matter how often you sip from your water supply. And you become very aware of how often you're sipping. Every swallow feels like a tiny decision with future consequences. A lesser-known truth is that many immigrants began rationing water far earlier than they expected. Not because it was scarce yet, but because uncertainty made them cautious. The trail trained people to think ahead constantly, to treat every resource as if it might be the last of its kind. You stop briefly near a stream, shallow and slow-moving. People refill containers, some kneeling, some standing, all watching the water with a mix of gratitude and suspicion. It looks clear enough. That's comforting. It's also misleading, but you don't know that yet. Historians still debate how much misinformation shaped early trail decisions. Some argue that guidebooks and advice underestimated daily hardship to encourage settlement. Others suggest immigrants heard the warnings but chose optimism anyway, believing suffering was temporary and survivable. Either way, the result was the same: a steady erosion of confidence as reality set in. Camp that evening feels different from the night before. There's less chatter, more quiet sitting. People move slower, conserving energy without quite admitting it. The fires burn lower. The laughter, when it appears, sounds thinner, like it's being rationed too. You lower yourself to the ground and feel the ache spread upward from your feet, through your legs, into your back. It's not sharp pain, just persistent, undeniable. Your body is learning the cost of this decision, one muscle fiber at a time. As darkness settles, the sky opens wide above you. Stars sharp and plentiful in a way you've never seen before. It's beautiful, genuinely so. And for a moment, lying there, you feel a flicker of wonder. Maybe this is worth it. Maybe the trail is just an adjustment period. Then you hear someone vomiting softly a few wagons down. Someone else groans as they try to stretch a cramping leg. An argument breaks out quietly over whether tomorrow's pace should be slower. The night cools quickly. The heat drains away, replaced by a chill that sneaks under blankets and reminds you how thin your protection really is. You stare up at the stars and let your breathing slow, the sounds of the camp blending into a low, uneven hum. Wheels creak as someone shifts in their sleep. An ox snorts. The wind moves through grass like a whispered warning. The optimism you brought with you hasn't vanished, but it has learned to sit down. And as sleep finally pulls you under, a gentle, tired thought drifts through your mind. If this is what the easy part feels like, the trail is going to take far more from you than you planned to give. By the time the sun lifts itself over the horizon again, you've already been awake for a while, listening to the small orchestra of discomfort that seems to tune up inside your body every morning. Your feet throb before they even touch the ground, as if they're trying to negotiate a later start. Your calves feel tight, your hips stiff, and your shoulders carry a dull ache that didn't exist back when you thought walking all day was a personality trait. You stand anyway. Everyone does. There's a quiet understanding forming now, unspoken but shared. The wagon moves whether you're ready or not. And falling behind is not an option you want to explore. The trail doesn't punish you all at once. It waits. It lets small problems pile up until stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. A well-known historical fact is that most immigrants walked beside their wagons rather than riding in them. Wagons were heavy, space was limited, and animals were already overworked. Riding was reserved for children, the sick, or the truly exhausted. Even then, it was temporary. Comfort, like everything else on the trail, had to justify itself. You fall into your place beside the wheel, matching its pace. Step after step, the rhythm becomes hypnotic. Crunch of dirt, squeak of axle, soft jingle of harness. Repeat. At first, you try to vary your stride to ease the pressure on your feet. That helps for about 10 minutes. Then the pain finds you again. Unimpressed by your creativity. The land opens wide around you. Rolling prairie stretches to the horizon, broken only by distant trees and the thin, wavering line of the trail itself. There is nowhere to hide from the sun now. No buildings, no fences, no shade that lasts longer than a passing cloud. The sky feels enormous, like it's watching. A lesser-known detail from trail diaries is how monotonous this scenery could feel after the initial novelty wore off. Endless grass, endless walking, endless sameness. The mind, deprived of new landmarks, turns inward. Thoughts loop, worries repeat, silence becomes loud. You notice how conversations have changed. Early excitement has faded into practical exchanges. How far today? How much water left? Whose ox looks off? Jokes still appear, but they're shorter now, more functional. Humor becomes a tool rather than a pastime. Someone ahead limps noticeably. Someone behind keeps stopping to adjust a boot that no longer fits quite right. Feet swell on the trail. Shoes, which seemed perfectly reasonable back in town, now pinch and rub in ways that feel personal. Blisters form quietly, then announce themselves with every step. A well-known historical event tied to this phase is the growing realization among emigrants that the trail was less about grand adventure and more about endurance. There were no heroic charges, no decisive moments, just day after day of showing up and moving forward despite mounting fatigue. By midday, the heat presses down with familiar insistence. Sweat soaks into your clothes, then dries, leaving them stiff and salty. Your mouth feels dry again, and you force yourself to sip slowly, even though thirst begs for more. Every swallow is counted now, even if no one says so out loud. You pass another wagon stopped by the side of the trail. A woman sits on the ground, boot off, staring at a raw, red blister the size of a coin. She looks more tired than hurt. That's what scares you. Pain you can manage. Weariness seeps deeper. A lesser-known fact is that minor foot injuries were a major factor in trail fatalities. Not directly, but indirectly. Blisters led to infections. Infections led to weakness. Weakness slowed progress, and slowing down made everything else more dangerous. The trail punished inefficiency, even when it came from something as small as a bad seam in a shoe. Historians still debate how much physical conditioning emigrants had before departure. Some were farmers accustomed to hard labor. Others came from towns and trades that required far less daily exertion. The trail did not care about your background. It demanded the same miles from everyone. You stop briefly near a stand of trees. The shade a temporary blessing. You lean against the wagon, close your eyes, and feel your heartbeat in your ears. It's steady, but louder than usual, like your body is working overtime and wants credit for it. When the wagons start moving again, there's a collective sigh, not of relief, but of acceptance. This is the day. This is the pace. You step back into line because there is nothing else to do. As the afternoon drags on, your mind begins to drift. You count steps, You imagine cold water. You think about chairs. Actual chairs. Ridiculous luxury items with backs and legs and no opinions about distance. The thought almost makes you smile. Another gently ironic thought floats by. People in the future will turn this journey into a board game, where you can rest by clicking a button. Right now, resting means stopping, and stopping means falling behind. Camp that night forms with less discussion than before. Everyone knows the routine now. Fires, food, water, sleep. Efficiency replaces curiosity. You eat without much appetite. More out of obligation than hunger. The food tastes the same as yesterday. It will taste the same tomorrow. You stretch out on the ground and feel your muscles protest as they cool. The ache is deeper now. More settled, like it's decided to stay a while. You flex your toes and feel a sharp reminder from somewhere near your heel. The stars appear again, bright and indifferent. The trail hums softly around you, low voices, shifting bodies, the occasional cough. Somewhere nearby, someone mutters that they didn't realize walking could hurt this much. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of the day replay itself. Step, wheel, dust, step. And as sleep finally finds you, a slow, heavy realization settles in, as gentle as it is unavoidable. This journey isn't going to defeat you with drama or spectacle. It's going to wear you down. Quietly. Patiently. 1 mile at a time. By the 5th morning, the idea of food has shifted from pleasure to strategy. You don't wake up thinking about what sounds good. You wake up thinking about what still exists. What can be spared, and what absolutely cannot be wasted. Hunger hasn't fully arrived yet, but it's circling. Polite for now, like it's waiting for an invitation. Breakfast is familiar in the most uninspiring way. Flour, bacon, maybe beans if someone feels generous or worried enough to open another sack. The smell is comforting, but also faintly alarming, because you already know this smell too well. It's the scent of repetition. A well-known historical fact is that the standard trail diet was painfully monotonous. Flour, bacon, beans, rice, and coffee if supplies allowed. Fresh food was rare and became rarer as the journey stretched on. Variety was a luxury that disappeared early, long before desperation set in. You chew slowly, not because the food demands it, but because your mind is already doing math. How many days at this pace? How many meals left? How much flour weighs how much? You didn't come here planning to be an accountant, but the trail has quietly promoted you. Someone nearby jokes that at least bacon never gets boring. Someone else replies that it absolutely does. You just haven't been hungry enough yet. The laughter is brief, but genuine. Humor is still working. That won't always be true. You start walking again, the wagon's wheel marking time beside you like a metronome that doesn't care about your feelings. With every step, the smell of bacon lingers in your clothes, mixing with sweat and dust until it becomes something uniquely trail. It's not unpleasant, just permanent. By midday, the sun presses down hard enough that even thinking about food feels like work. Your stomach is quiet now, conserving energy, and your mouth feels dry no matter how carefully you sip water. The trail ahead shimmers faintly, heat bending the air into something almost dreamlike. A lesser-known detail from immigrant diaries is how quickly people began to crave textures rather than flavors. Something crunchy, something fresh, something that wasn't soft, greasy, or beige. Some wrote obsessively about apples, onions, or even plain lettuce, as if naming them might summon them into existence. You pass a small group stopped near the trail, crouched around something on the ground. For a moment, your mind leaps. Food? But it's just a broken crate being repurposed as firewood. Still, the instinctive hope surprises you. Another wagon nearby opens a sack of flour, and a small cloud puffs into the air. You watch every grain settle, painfully aware that some of them won't make it into a meal. Waste feels louder now. Spilled flour might as well be spilled time. A well-known historical reality is that many immigrants brought items they believed could be traded later: furniture, extra clothing, tools. As food supplies dwindled, those items lost value quickly. Hunger has a way of simplifying economics. You catch yourself staring at a barrel as if it might whisper its remaining contents to you. You resist the urge to check again. You already checked this morning. Checking twice won't make more appear. Historians still debate how much underestimating food consumption contributed to later suffering on the trail. Some argue that supply lists were unrealistic. Others point out that people did plan carefully, but didn't account for loss, spilled sacks, spoiled meat, theft, animals eating into supplies. The trail doesn't just consume food, it leaks it away. In the afternoon, someone shares a small treat, a handful of dried fruit saved for morale. It's passed around carefully, each person taking just one piece, holding it for a moment before eating. You let it sit on your tongue, the sweetness almost shocking after days of blandness. It's gone too quickly, but the memory lingers. A gently ironic thought drifts through your mind. Someday, people will pay extra for simple pioneer food at themed restaurants, calling it rustic and authentic. Right now, you'd trade authenticity for a single fresh vegetable without hesitation. Camp that evening forms as usual, but the cooking feels quieter. There's less chatter around the fires, more staring into flames. The meals taste fine, fine enough, but the act of eating feels heavier. Weighted with awareness. This isn't dinner, it's fuel management. You notice a child nearby poking at their food, uninterested. An adult gently insists they eat anyway. Appetite is no longer the authority here. Survival is. As darkness settles, you lie back and listen to the night sounds, wind through grass, low voices, the distant creak of wagons shifting. Your stomach tightens slightly, not with pain, but with anticipation. Hunger hasn't arrived yet, but you can feel the space where it will sit. Your thoughts drift. Slower now, softer. You imagine meals back home, not fancy ones. Just ordinary dinners that arrived every day without negotiation. You hadn't known how generous that was. Sleep comes in short stretches, interrupted by dreams of food that feel almost rude in their detail. Bread that tears just right. Water that tastes cold and clean. Apples that crunch. When you wake briefly and stare up at the stars, a calm, tired realization settles in. The trail isn't starving you yet. It's teaching you how easy it would be. And that lesson, like everything else out here, is being delivered patiently, one quiet meal at a time. The water looks harmless. It always does. You come upon it in the late morning, a wide, slow-moving ribbon cutting through the land, its surface catching the sun in gentle flashes. The banks are soft with grass. In places, the water is clear enough to see pebbles resting at the bottom. Smoothed by time and patience, birds gather near the edge. In every visible way, it seems like an answer to a problem you've been carrying since dawn. Your throat tightens at the sight of it. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that water was everywhere, and yet never truly safe. Rivers, creeks, ponds, and stagnant pools dotted the route, but cleanliness was a luxury no one could reliably identify. Clear did not mean clean. Moving did not mean harmless. The trail offered water generously, then quietly punished those who trusted it too much. You kneel to fill a container, watching ripples spread from the rim as it dips below the surface. The water feels cool on your fingers, almost comforting. You imagine it washing the dust from your mouth, easing the dryness that settled deep in your throat. You take a careful sip, then another, trying not to drink too quickly, trying not to look desperate in front of something that cannot judge you. Nearby, others do the same. Some drink deeply, some hesitate, sniffing the water as if it might reveal its intentions. A few boil it over small fires, impatiently watching steam rise while thirst taps insistently at their patience. A lesser-known detail from trail accounts is how inconsistent water practices were. Some groups boiled water whenever possible. Others rarely did, either from lack of fuel, lack of time, or simple disbelief that something so clear could be dangerous. Germ theory, as you would understand it, does not exist yet. Illness feels like bad luck, not microscopic betrayal. You move on, refreshed in the shallowest sense. The water settles in your stomach, cool and present. For a while, it feels like a small victory. By afternoon, the trail resumes its familiar rhythm. Walking, dust, the slow creak of wood and leather. The land opens again, and the river slips behind you, already fading into memory. Your body feels slightly better for the drink, your mind a little clearer. You allow yourself to think, that wasn't so bad. That's when the first discomfort arrives. It's subtle at first, a tightness low in your abdomen, easy to dismiss as hunger or the aftertaste of bacon grease. You ignore it, everyone does. The trail teaches you early that not every sensation deserves attention. An hour later, the tightness sharpens. You slow your pace slightly, hoping movement will ease it. It doesn't. A dull cramp spreads, accompanied by a faint wave of nausea that makes the horizon tilt just enough to be annoying. You breathe through it, reminding yourself that bodies are dramatic sometimes. This is probably nothing. A well-known historical event tied to trail water is the spread of gastrointestinal illnesses, often mislabeled at the time as simple summer complaint or flux. Today, we'd recognize many of these cases as waterborne infections. Back then, they were just another hazard, unseen, unnamed, and poorly understood. You notice others slowing too. A wagon stops briefly. Someone climbs down and disappears behind a stand of brush, returning a few minutes later with a strained expression and forced calm. No one comments. Privacy is respected. Denial is efficient. By late afternoon, the trail has grown quieter. The cramps intensify, coming in waves now, each one demanding more of your attention. Your mouth waters unpleasantly, a warning you recognize too late. You signal to stop, moving away from the wagons as discreetly as possible. The ground feels unsteady beneath you, and the world narrows to breath and discomfort. It passes. Eventually, you return, pale and quiet, hoping no one noticed how long you were gone. You drink another small sip of water, then immediately regret it. A lesser-known truth is that many immigrants continued drinking contaminated water even after symptoms began. Not realizing the connection, thirst overruled logic. Clean alternatives were scarce. The idea that the water itself was the cause felt abstract compared to the very real need to drink something. Someone jokes weakly that the trail is testing your digestion. You manage a small smile. Humor still works, though it's clearly running on reduced power. Historians still debate how widespread waterborne illness truly was on the Oregon Trail compared to other causes of sickness. Some argue that poor sanitation within camps, shared spaces, limited waste management, played an equally large role. Others point to the sheer number of diary entries mentioning sudden illness after river crossings or pond stops as evidence that water was a primary culprit. The truth, like most things on the trail, is likely a combination of both. Camp that night feels tense. Fires burn low, not for lack of wood, but for lack of energy. A few people eat sparingly. Others skip food altogether, staring at their tin cups as if trying to convince themselves it's empty for a reason. The sound of coughing and quiet retching drifts through the darkness, carried on the breeze like something the night doesn't quite know what to do with. You lie down carefully, curling slightly to ease the ache in your stomach. The ground is hard, but that's not what keeps you awake. It's the uncertainty. Will this pass by morning? Will it get worse? How many others are feeling the same thing right now? Staring up at the same stars with the same quiet worry? Another softly modern comparison slips into your thoughts. It's like realizing too late that the tap water in an unfamiliar place isn't safe. Except there's no bottled alternative, no filter, no quick fix, just the slow, patient consequences of a choice you didn't know you were making. The night stretches. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by waves of discomfort and the distant sounds of others moving through the same private misery. The stars remain bright and indifferent, offering no commentary. By morning, some people feel better, others don't. A few are noticeably weaker, moving slowly, faces drawn. No one announces what's happening. There's no name for it, no clear plan. The wagons move anyway. You rise carefully, testing your balance, gauging the state of your body like a fragile tool. The cramps have eased, but not vanished. You drink a measured sip of water, bracing yourself, and wait. The trail doesn't pause to see how you're doing. It never does. As you step back into line, the dust rising around your boots, a quiet realization settles in, gentle, but firm. Out here, even the things you need to survive can turn against you. And the trail doesn't warn you when that's about to happen. It just waits, patient as ever, watching to see who figures it out in time. By the time the word cholera reaches your ears, it arrives the way bad news usually does on the trail, indirectly, quietly, and already too late to feel theoretical. You hear it whispered first, passed from one wagon to the next like something fragile and dangerous. Someone ahead collapsed during the night. Someone else is very sick, too sick to walk. A child hasn't stopped vomiting since dawn. No one raises their voice. Panic wastes energy, and energy is already in short supply. A well-known historical fact is that cholera was the single most feared killer on the Oregon Trail. It moved fast, struck suddenly, and could kill within hours. Emigrants didn't fully understand what caused it, only that it seemed to follow rivers, camps, and crowds, appearing without warning and vanishing just as unpredictably. You walk more slowly now, not because your feet hurt more than usual, but because your attention keeps drifting outward, scanning faces for signs you don't yet know how to interpret. Pale skin, sunken eyes, someone sitting when they should be walking, someone drinking too much water, or not at all. The land doesn't look different. That's what unsettles you most. The grass still ripples in the breeze. The sky remains impossibly blue. If you didn't know better, you'd think nothing had changed. A lesser-known detail from trail accounts is how often cholera outbreaks coincided with heavy traffic along the route. Earlier wagon trains, military posts, and river traffic all contributed to contaminated water sources. By the time many immigrants arrived, the bacteria had already been introduced, waiting patiently for the next group of thirsty travelers. You feel a familiar tightening in your stomach and immediately wonder if you're imagining it. Every sensation becomes suspect now. Hunger? Illness. Fatigue? Illness. That brief wave of dizziness when you stand up too quickly? Definitely illness. Your body, unhelpfully, refuses to clarify. Someone near you insists that cholera comes from bad air. Someone else says it's caused by fear. Another swears by vinegar, offering a small bottle like it's a talisman. Folk remedies circulate quickly in the absence of better answers. You accept none of them outright, but you don't dismiss them either. Certainty is a luxury here. Historians still debate how much emigrants understood about cholera transmission versus how much they relied on superstition and observation. Some diaries show remarkable insight, mentions of water sources and sanitation, while others reflect deep confusion. Blaming weather, emotions, or divine judgment, without a clear cause, prevention becomes guesswork. By midday, the trail has thinned, wagons spread farther apart, not intentionally, but because some cannot keep pace. A stopped wagon becomes something you notice immediately now, your eyes drawn to it the way you might glance at a car pulled over on the highway. Hoping it's nothing serious, you pass one such wagon in silence. A man sits on the ground, back against a wheel, breathing shallowly. His skin looks gray, almost translucent. A woman kneels beside him, holding a cup of water he cannot seem to keep down. Their oxen stand nearby, unmoving, as if they understand this is not a moment for impatience. No one stops. Not because they don't care, but because stopping doesn't help unless you know how. You walk past with your eyes forward, carrying a quiet, heavy guilt that settles somewhere behind your ribs. This is another lesson the trail delivers without explanation. Sometimes survival means continuing. A well-known historical pattern is that cholera deaths often happened quickly and were followed by immediate burial. Sometimes within hours, there was no time, and often no strength, for ceremony. Graves were shallow, marked hastily, if at all. The trail moved on. You feel the weight of that knowledge press against you as the afternoon drags. Every stop feels risky now. Every shared water source feels like a gamble you didn't agree to play. Camp that night is tense and subdued. Fires are spaced farther apart. People keep to their own groups, not out of cruelty, but fear. The sound of coughing seems louder. The quiet stretches longer. You eat little. You drink carefully. You lie down early. Exhaustion pulling at you harder than fear. Sleep, when it comes, is uneasy. Sometime in the night, you wake to muffled movement. A small group passes your wagon. Lantern light bobbing softly. They don't speak. You don't ask where they're going. You already know. Morning arrives with a thin, gray light. The wagon train is smaller now. No announcement is made. No names are called out loud. People count silently instead, eyes flicking toward familiar shapes that aren't where they should be. The trail absorbs the loss without comment, the way it absorbs everything else. A lesser-known truth is that some immigrants described cholera as more frightening than any other hardship, not because it was the most painful, but because it stripped away the illusion of control. You could plan for weather. You could prepare for hunger. Cholera didn't negotiate. Historians still debate whether emigrants could have reduced cholera deaths significantly with the knowledge available at the time. Some argue that better camp sanitation and stricter water discipline might have helped. Others note that the conditions of mass movement and limited understanding made outbreaks almost inevitable. Either way, the trail became a corridor of disease as well as ambition. You rise, pack, and step back into line. Your body feels fragile now. like something that could tip either way with the wrong combination of heat, water, and bad luck. You walk more carefully, as if gentleness might persuade fate to overlook you. The dust rises again, the wheels turn, the land stretches on, unchanged. And as you move forward, one quiet thought follows you with every step, heavy and unavoidable. Out here, survival isn't just about strength or preparation. Sometimes, it's about whether the trail decides to notice you at all. The graves begin appearing without warning. At first, you mistake them for something else. Low mounds of earth, oddly placed stones, a crooked marker that looks more like debris than intention. Then you notice the pattern. One mound near the trail, another a few hundred yards later. Some marked with a simple wooden board, others with nothing at all. The earth smooth just enough to suggest that someone stopped, dug, and moved on quickly. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that graves lined the route in staggering numbers. Estimates vary, but thousands died along the trail, and many were buried within sight of the very road that carried the living forward. Death was not hidden here. It was part of the landscape. You walk past the first clear grave in silence. No one announces it. No one slows down much. The wagon wheels creak on. Indifferent, you feel a strange tension in your chest. Not grief exactly, but recognition. Someone stood where you're standing now. Someone walked beside a wagon like yours. Someone had plans. A lesser-known detail from trail accounts is how often graves were intentionally left shallow. Not out of disrespect, but necessity. The ground was hard. Tools were limited. Time was dangerous to spend in one place. Shallow graves meant animals might disturb them later, which is a thought you immediately push away because it helps no one. A child ahead of you asks what the mound is. An adult answers too quickly, too casually, calling it just dirt. The child accepts this explanation. Satisfied for now, you're not. As the day stretches on, the graves become more frequent. Some are grouped, 2 or 3 close together, suggesting illness rather than accident. Others stand alone, a single marker leaning slightly, as if tired. You begin to recognize the shape instinctively, the way the earth looks when it's been turned recently. Another quietly unsettling realization settles in. No one stops to read names, because most markers don't have them. Even when they do, the wood is already fading. The letters crude and shallow. Rain will take them soon enough. Sun will finish the job. A well-known historical event tied to this part of the trail is how emigrants began using graves as landmarks. Directions referenced them casually. Turn after the second grave, or camp just past the mound with the broken board. Death became navigational. That thought lingers with you longer than you expect. Someone near you mutters that it's bad luck to look too long. Someone else says it's disrespectful not to. The debate ends quickly, not because it's resolved, but because the trail doesn't wait for moral clarity. Historians still debate how emigrants emotionally processed the constant presence of death. Some diaries describe numbness, a kind of emotional callus that formed out of necessity. Others show deep, private grief recorded only at night, when there was finally space to feel it. What's clear is that survival required a delicate balance between acknowledgement and detachment. By midday, you've passed more graves than you can comfortably count. Your steps feel heavier, though nothing physical has changed. The sun is warm, the breeze is light, the world looks, objectively, fine. That contrast makes everything worse. A softly modern comparison drifts through your mind. It's like driving past rows of abandoned cars on the side of a highway after a disaster. Each one a story. Each one proof that the road ahead doesn't guarantee arrival. You find yourself watching the ground more carefully now, scanning not just for obstacles, but for signs of recent digging. It's an instinct you don't remember choosing. Camp that night forms near a slight rise, the wagons circling with familiar efficiency. Fires are lit, food is cooked, the routine continues, because it has to, but conversation is sparse. People sit closer to their own families, their own wagons, their own fragile sense of safety. Someone suggests moving camp farther from the trail tomorrow, away from the graves. Someone else shrugs and says the trail is the trail. You can't outrun what follows it. You lie down and stare at the dark sky. Stars scattered carelessly overhead. Somewhere nearby, an animal moves through grass. Its sound sharp in the quiet. You tense, then relax. It's just life continuing. Your thoughts drift back to the graves, to the idea that this road is paved not just with ruts and dust, but with endings. The people buried here didn't fail. They participated. They tried. As sleep edges closer, a calm, sobering realization settles in, heavy but steady. The trail doesn't mark death as something separate from the journey. It weaves it in, quietly, casually, as just another part of the way west. The weather stops pretending to be consistent. You wake to a sky that can't seem to make up its mind. Pale blue in one direction, heavy and gray in another. The air feels different too, thicker somehow, like it's holding something back. Your body notices before your mind does. There's a tension in your shoulders, a restlessness in the camp that no one names. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that weather was wildly unpredictable, especially across the plains. One day could bring punishing heat, the next sudden cold, violent storms, or winds strong enough to flatten tents and scatter belongings. Forecasting didn't exist. The sky offered no explanations, only outcomes. The wagons move anyway. By mid-morning, the heat arrives first. The sun breaks through the clouds and presses down hard, turning the air dry and sharp. Sweat forms quickly, soaking your clothes and then vanishing just as fast, stolen by wind and movement. Your mouth dries again, and you sip water carefully, already aware that this heat might not be the worst thing today. The land offers no shelter. Grass stretches endlessly, bending and whispering in the breeze. The horizon shimmers, heat bending distance into illusion. Somewhere ahead, clouds begin to stack, rising tall and dark, their edges sharp against the sky. A lesser-known detail from emigrant accounts is how often people underestimated storms because they seemed distant and slow-moving. On the plains, storms can close distance quickly, carried by wind across open land with nothing to slow them down. What looks far away is often already on its way. You feel the wind shift. It cools suddenly, brushing your damp skin and raising goosebumps along your arms. The temperature drops fast enough to be noticeable, like someone opened a door you didn't know was there. A low rumble reaches you, not loud, just present enough to demand attention. Someone points to the sky. Someone else swears softly. The rain begins without much warning. Heavy drops striking dust and skin with sharp, cold taps. Within minutes, it intensifies, the sky emptying itself in sheets. The ground darkens, then softens, then begins to cling to your boots. Each step grows heavier as mud builds, turning the simple act of walking into work. Wagons slow, wheels struggle for traction, oxen lower their heads and lean in, muscles straining against harness and mud. You push when asked, boots sliding, breath coming faster as rain soaks through every layer you're wearing. A well-known historical event tied to trail weather is how sudden storms could halt entire wagon trains for days. Flooded streams became impassable, mud trapped wheels, supplies got wet, illness followed close behind. Weather didn't just delay progress, it multiplied every other problem. Lightning flashes in the distance, close enough now to count seconds before thunder answers. The sound rolls across the plains, deep and powerful, echoing through your chest. You feel very small under that sky. A lesser-known truth is that many immigrants feared storms not just for the rain, but for the cold that followed. Wet clothes, dropping temperatures, and limited shelter could turn an afternoon storm into a night of shivering misery. Especially for children and the sick. By the time the rain eases, you are soaked, muddy, and tired in a way that feels different from walking fatigue. This is a deeper exhaustion, one that comes from working against the land instead of moving across it. Your hands are numb, your clothes cling, your boots squelch with every step. Camp is called early, not because the day's distance is done, but because continuing would cost more than stopping. Fires are harder to start now. Damp wood smokes and hisses, filling the air with a sharp, stinging smell. People huddle close, sharing heat and frustration. As night falls, the temperature drops quickly. The rain has taken the day's warmth with it. You wrap yourself in whatever dry layers you have left, grateful you packed them, quietly regretting every item that got wet. A softly ironic thought drifts through your mind. Back home, weather is something you talk about. Out here, it decides how much of you gets used up today. Historians still debate how much weather influenced overall survival rates on the trail compared to disease and supply shortages. Some argue it was a secondary factor. Others note that weather often triggered the conditions that made disease spread and supplies fail. The trail, once again, refuses to separate its hardships neatly. You lie awake, listening to the wind move through wet grass, the occasional rumble of distant thunder fading away. Your body aches with a new, bone-deep chill, one that settles in quietly and refuses to be ignored. Sleep comes slowly, wrapped in the sound of dripping canvas and shifting bodies. And as your thoughts finally soften, one clear understanding drifts through the fog of exhaustion. The trail doesn't just test your endurance. It tests your ability to adapt, to heat that burns, to cold that creeps, to skies that change their minds without asking you first. And tomorrow, it will do it all over again. With a completely different mood. The oxen are quieter this morning. You notice it right away, not because silence is rare on the trail, but because these animals usually announce themselves in small, familiar ways. A snort, a shuffle, the creak of leather as they lean into their yokes. Today, their movements feel slower, heavier, as if each step requires a private calculation. A well-known historical fact is that oxen were the backbone of most Oregon trail wagon trains. They were cheaper, hardier, and more patient than horses or mules. They could survive on grass alone and endure long stretches of labor. But hardy didn't mean invincible. When an ox failed, everything failed with it. You move alongside the team, watching their flanks rise and fall with deep, steady breaths. Their hides are caked with dried mud from yesterday's storm, the cracks tracing faint maps across their sides. One ox favors a leg slightly, just enough to notice if you're paying attention. You wish you weren't. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how emotionally attached many immigrants became to their oxen. These animals weren't just tools. They were partners in survival. People named them, talked to them, praised them, and sometimes apologized to them. When an ox collapsed, it felt less like equipment failure and more like losing a member of the group. The wagons begin to roll, and the oxen lean forward, muscles tightening beneath thick skin. The ground is still soft in places, the ruts slick and uneven. Each pull demands effort. You push when asked, boots slipping, hands braced against wood that smells faintly of wet grain and iron. By mid-morning, the sun returns with a sharpness that feels almost rude after yesterday's cold. Steam rises from damp earth and hides, the air turning heavy and close. The oxen's breathing grows louder, tongues lolling slightly as heat builds. Someone calls for a brief stop. The ox with the bad leg stands still, head low, eyes duller than before. You watch its chest move, slow and labored. Flies gather quickly, drawn to warmth and moisture. Someone waves them away, talking softly, like tone might persuade muscle and bone to cooperate. A well-known historical pattern on the trail is that animals rarely gave dramatic warning before failing. They worked until they couldn't, then stopped. An ox that lay down in harness was a serious problem. Getting it back up was difficult. Leaving it behind was worse. The wagon train waits. Time stretches uncomfortably as people gather, offering suggestions that range from hopeful to desperate. Loosen the harness. Let it rest. Lighten the load. You remove items from the wagon, stacking them beside the trail, barrels, crates, a chair that somehow survived this long. Each item feels heavier now that you know it might be sacrificed. A lesser-known truth is that many immigrants shed possessions not gradually, but suddenly. In moments like this, when an animal faltered, hard choices were made fast. Furniture, tools, even cherished items were abandoned to preserve what mattered most: forward motion. The ox struggles, then slowly pushes itself upright. There's a collective release of breath. Relief washes through the group. Cautious and temporary, the harness is adjusted, the load reduced, the train moves on again. Slower now, everyone watching that animal with quiet concern. You walk beside it, matching its pace, listening to the steady thud of hooves in mud and dust. You feel oddly protective, as if your attention might keep it standing. Another gently modern comparison slips into your mind. It's like watching the last working car in a long commute finally start making strange noises. Everyone knows it's holding things together, and no one knows what happens when it doesn't. By afternoon, the heat is relentless. The oxen stop more frequently, heads hanging, sides heaving. Water is offered sparingly, not because they don't deserve it, but because water must last for everyone, human and animal alike. Thirst is negotiated here, not eliminated. Historians still debate whether oxen were truly the best choice for the trail compared to horses or mules. Some argue oxen's endurance outweighed their slowness. Others note that when oxen failed, replacement was nearly impossible, while horses could sometimes be traded or stolen. The trail, once again, refused simple answers. Late in the day, you hear it. A heavy sound, a shift, then a deep, final stillness. The ox has gone down. It doesn't thrash. It doesn't cry out. It simply stops, folding into the ground like something that has reached the end of its instructions. People rush in, voices low but urgent. You stand close enough to see its eyes. Glassy and unfocused, chest barely moving. They try to get it up. They fail. The decision comes quietly, without ceremony. The harness is removed. The wagon is lightened further. Another team will try to pull it tomorrow. If possible, the ox is left where it lies, already beginning to blend into the landscape. A well-known historical reality is that many animals died along the Oregon Trail, their bodies lining the route alongside human graves. Their loss slowed trains, reduced carrying capacity, and forced difficult choices. The trail consumed animals as readily as it consumed people. Camp that night is subdued. No one mentions the ox directly. They don't need to. Its absence is loud enough. The wagon stands lighter now, emptier, its shape slightly wrong, like a smile missing a tooth. You sit by the fire, staring into the flames, thinking about how survival here is balanced on so many fragile legs, some human, some not. You think about how much of this journey depends on creatures that cannot understand the destination. Only the pull. As you lie down, muscles aching, the image of the ox settles into your thoughts. Not dramatically, just steadily. A reminder. Out here, survival isn't just about how strong you are. It's about how long everything around you can keep going. And the trail has a way of finding the weakest link, then asking everyone else to keep moving without it. The river announces itself long before you reach it. You hear it first, a low, constant rush that doesn't fade as you walk, only grows wider, heavier, more insistent. By the time the water comes into view, your shoulders have already tightened, your pace slowed by instinct. This is not the gentle creek from a few days ago. This is something with opinions. The river stretches across the land like a moving boundary, broad and restless, its surface broken by shifting currents and darker seams where depth hides. The banks are uneven, chewed away in places, muddy and slick where others have already tested them. Wagon tracks disappear into the water on one side and reappear, sometimes on the other. A well-known historical fact is that river crossings were among the deadliest moments on the Oregon Trail. Drownings were common, wagons tipped, animals panicked. A single misjudgment could erase months of effort in seconds. The trail demanded decisions here, and it demanded them without enough information. You stop with the others at the edge and watch. Some people wade in cautiously, probing with sticks, reading the water the way you might read a face, looking for clues. For honesty, others stand back, arms crossed, convinced that patience will somehow improve the situation. It won't. Rivers don't negotiate. The three options are discussed, as they always are. Ford it. Drive the wagon straight through and hope the current stays manageable. Float it. Seal the wagon with tar and rope. Detach it from the animals, and let it drift across while everything else swims or ferries separately. Turn back. Find another crossing, if one exists, and accept the loss of time and energy. None of these options feel good. A lesser-known detail from trail accounts is how often people chose poorly not because they were reckless, but because they were exhausted. Judgment wears thin on the trail. What seems good enough after weeks of hardship might be unthinkable back home. You watch a wagon attempt the ford upstream. At first, it goes well. The water reaches the hubs. Then the axle. The oxen strain, heads low, muscles trembling. The current pushes sideways, just enough to make the wagon tilt. Someone shouts. The driver cracks a whip, not hard, just desperate. For a moment, it looks like they'll make it. Then one wheel drops into a deeper channel. The wagon lurches. Water surges higher, spilling over the floorboards. The oxen panic, pulling unevenly now. The wagon slews sideways, the current catching its broad side like a hand on a shoulder. People run. Ropes are thrown. Shouting breaks the careful quiet. The wagon doesn't tip completely, but it loses something. Barrels, a crate, a bundle of clothing. Each piece ripped free and swallowed by brown water that doesn't slow down to acknowledge it. When the wagon finally scrapes onto the far bank, it looks wounded, wet, lighter in the wrong ways. The group watches in silence. A well-known historical pattern is that many river losses were partial, not total. Wagons survived, people survived, but food, tools, and irreplaceable items did not. These losses were sometimes more devastating than outright disaster, because they didn't stop the journey. They just made the rest of it harder. Your group debates. Someone argues for fording now, before the water rises further. Someone else insists on floating the wagon, pointing to the speed of the current. A third voice suggests waiting, but no one can say what for. The river will still be here tomorrow, just as indifferent. Historians still debate how emigrants assessed river risk without reliable measurements. Some relied on experience, others on hearsay. Many simply followed the wagon ahead, assuming collective judgment equaled safety. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. Eventually, a decision is made. You help unload the wagon, sealing seams with tar, tying ropes tight, double-checking knots that feel suddenly very important. The air smells sharp and sticky. Your hands are blackened, your patience thin. The oxen watch with wide, uneasy eyes as their world changes shape. When the wagon is pushed into the water, it floats, barely. The current grabs it immediately, pulling it sideways, stretching the ropes taut. You wade in up to your thighs, then your waist. The cold shocking and immediate. The river presses hard against your legs, trying to fold you into itself. The crossing is chaos, controlled only by shouting and grip strength. Water slaps against the wagon. Someone slips. Someone else grabs them just in time. The rope bites into your hands, wet and rough, and you grit your teeth, focusing on the far bank like it's the only thing in the world. Then, abruptly, your feet find firmer ground. The wagon scrapes onto shore. The ropes slacken. The current loses interest and moves on without you. For a moment, no one speaks. Everyone just stands there, soaked, breathing hard, alive. A laugh breaks out, short, shaky, contagious. Relief floods through the group, followed quickly by assessment. What's wet? What's ruined? What's missing? You take inventory with the seriousness of someone checking for injuries after a fall. Some things are gone. Not everything. Enough. Camp that night is quieter than usual. Clothes hang to dry. Fires burn higher, driven by the need for warmth and reassurance. The river murmurs nearby, unchanged by your struggle, already erasing the evidence of what it almost took. You sit close to the fire, hands extended, feeling heat creep back into your fingers. The crossing replays in your mind, not dramatically, just persistently, like a reminder. As sleep finally approaches, wrapped in the crackle of flames and the distant rush of water, a steady realization settles into place. On the trail, danger doesn't always arrive with violence. Sometimes it asks you to choose between bad options. And then it waits quietly to see which one you'll live with. The morning after the river feels strangely calm. The air is cool, the sky clear, and for a brief, almost suspicious moment, it seems like the trail might be giving something back. You wring out the last dampness from your clothes. Stretch muscles that still remember yesterday's cold shock. And convince yourself that surviving a river crossing should count as progress. Then you open the wagon. The inventory takes longer than usual, because you already know what you're going to find, and you're not eager to confirm it. Barrels are lighter. A sack of flour is clumped and sour-smelling, already starting to spoil. Tools that should be there aren't. You don't announce these losses. You just note them, quietly, the way people do when bad news isn't improved by saying it out loud. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that supply loss rarely came all at once. It happened in pieces: spilled food, ruined clothing, broken tools, each small enough to survive individually, but devastating in accumulation. The trail was excellent at subtraction. You tighten a rope, adjust a crate, and step back into line. The wagon creaks, sounding lighter now, less burdened, but not in a way that feels good. Lightness on the trail usually means something has been paid for already. By midday, hunger feels different. It's no longer just an absence. It's a presence, a dull, steady pressure that sits beneath your ribs and doesn't leave when you eat. Portions are smaller now, cut without ceremony. No speeches are made. Everyone notices anyway. A lesser-known detail from emigrant diaries is how often people began to mentally categorize food by days remaining, rather than by type. Flour wasn't flour anymore. It was 4 weeks. Bacon wasn't bacon. It was 12 dinners. Food became time. You find yourself watching others eat. Not out of resentment, but calculation. Who takes more? Who takes less? Who pretends not to be hungry? You hate this part of yourself. But you also understand it. Hunger rearranges priorities with unsettling efficiency. In the afternoon, you meet another wagon train heading east. They look different, thinner, quieter. Their wagons are fewer, their animals leaner. Someone asks how far to the river. Someone else asks about grass ahead. The questions are careful, weighted. Then comes the question everyone wants to ask and no one wants to answer honestly. How bad is it? The reply is vague, manageable, hard, depends. A well-known historical pattern is that immigrants rarely warned those behind them with full honesty. Sometimes out of kindness, sometimes out of pride, sometimes because admitting the truth felt like admitting failure. The trail encouraged optimism, even when it was misplaced. As the trains part, you notice how quickly they disappear behind you, swallowed by distance and dust. You wonder if anyone warned you properly, or if this was always how it went. Each group discovering the same lessons in isolation. Later that day, a small trade happens. Someone offers a tool in exchange for food. The negotiation is quiet, almost apologetic. The price is high. Everyone knows it. Everyone also knows it will only get higher later. The trade goes through. A lesser-known truth is that bartering on the trail often felt less like commerce and more like triage. People didn't trade what they didn't need. They traded what they couldn't afford to keep. Historians still debate whether most immigrants brought adequate supplies initially. Some argue that lists and guides were sufficient. Others point out that guides couldn't account for loss, illness, delays, and bad luck. Preparation met reality, and reality charged interest. Camp that night is subdued. Cooking takes less time now. There's less to cook. The fires feel smaller. The conversations shorter. People eat and then sit quietly, staring into flames that seem to consume more than they give back. You lie down with your stomach still awake, gently reminding you that tomorrow will require the same miles with fewer resources. Sleep comes slowly, interrupted by thoughts you didn't invite, calculations, memories of meals back home, quiet fear dressed up as practicality. As the stars wheel overhead, sharp and countless, a calm but heavy understanding settles in. Running out of supplies doesn't feel like an emergency at first. It feels like math, and the trail is very patient about waiting for the numbers to stop working in your favor. The injuries start small, which makes them easy to ignore. A nick on your hand from a slipped tool. A scrape along your shin from a low branch you didn't see in time. A twisted ankle that hurts for a minute, then fades into a background ache you decide you can live with. On the trail, pain is common enough to feel ordinary, and ordinary enough to feel safe. It isn't. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that many deaths didn't come from dramatic accidents, but from minor injuries that became serious over time. Without proper medical care, even small wounds could turn into infections. And infections, out here, didn't need permission to become fatal. You notice how careful everyone has become with their hands. Fingers are precious. Hands cook, repair, guide animals, lift, dig, and defend. A deep cut is not just painful, it's a threat to your ability to function. You clean a scrape with water that you already don't fully trust. Then wrap it in cloth that's been reused too many times. You tell yourself it's fine. You mean it. By mid-morning, someone ahead of you stumbles and falls. It's nothing dramatic, no cry, no crash. Just a misstep on uneven ground. They get up quickly, embarrassed, waving off concern. But they limp afterward, subtly at first, then more noticeably as the hours pass. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how frequently people hid injuries. Not to deceive others, but to avoid becoming a burden. Slowing the group could be dangerous. Being seen as the one who can't keep up carried a quiet stigma. Even among kind people. You understand that now. Your own ankle aches more than yesterday. You adjust your gait unconsciously. Shifting weight, shortening steps. It helps for a while. Then another muscle takes the strain and complains in turn. The body adapts, but adaptation has a cost. The sun climbs. Heat settling in again, and sweat stings as it finds tiny breaks in your skin. You wince, then laugh quietly at yourself. You never realized how many places there are for skin to fail. A well-known historical pattern is that trail injuries often compounded each other. A blister changed the way someone walked. That led to joint pain. Joint pain led to falls. Falls led to wounds. Wounds led to infection. The trail rewarded bodies that could absorb stress evenly and punished those that couldn't. At a brief stop, you sit and pull off a boot. Just to check. The blister on your heel has grown. The skin angry and shiny. You debate popping it. You debate leaving it alone. Both choices feel wrong. You wrap it tighter and put the boot back on, pretending you didn't see how bad it's getting. Someone nearby has a cough that sounds deeper than it should. Another person rubs their wrist constantly, jaw clenched. A child cries quietly over a scraped knee, then is coaxed into walking again. There's no room for lingering. Motion is the rule. Historians still debate how many trail deaths could have been prevented with basic medical knowledge and supplies. Some argue that even simple antiseptics and rest could have saved lives. Others note that rest itself was a luxury the trail rarely allowed. Stopping could mean falling behind. Falling behind could mean worse. In the afternoon, a man's hand is caught briefly between a wheel and the wagon frame. It's pulled free quickly, but not fast enough to avoid damage. He swears once, sharply, then goes quiet. The hand swells. The skin darkens. Someone offers a bandage. He accepts it with a nod, eyes fixed on the horizon. You see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Pain versus progress. Everyone makes that calculation eventually. A softly modern comparison drifts through your thoughts. It's like working through an illness because you don't have sick days. Accept the job as walking west, and the consequence of stopping isn't a warning from a boss. It's the land closing in. Camp that night carries a new kind of quiet. People tend to wounds by firelight. Hands moving gently. Faces tense with concentration. Cloth is cut into strips. Water is heated. Remedies are discussed in low voices. There's a sense of careful attention now, like everyone is suddenly aware of how thin the margin really is. You clean your ankle again. Slower this time. It throbs, warm and insistent. You lie back and elevate it slightly, hoping that counts as rest. You promise yourself you'll be more careful tomorrow, even though you know the trail doesn't care about promises. As the stars appear, sharp and steady overhead, you feel the day settle into your bones. Not just the fatigue, but the awareness that your body is no longer a background detail. It's a fragile system, doing its best under constant demand. And as sleep finally pulls you under, one calm, sobering thought drifts through your mind. On the trail, it's rarely the big dangers that finish you. It's the small ones you keep walking past. Until one day, you can't. The first encounter doesn't feel dramatic. There's no sudden tension, no raised voices, no clear sense that anything important is happening. You notice movement near the edge of camp in the late morning, figures on horseback. A few people standing at a distance, watching the wagons pass with the same quiet curiosity you've learned to adopt toward everything unfamiliar. Someone says, softly, Indians. The word carries weight, shaped by stories you've heard back home, most of them exaggerated. Many of them wrong. Your body reacts before your thoughts catch up. shoulders tightening, steps slowing, eyes searching for threat that hasn't actually appeared. A well-known historical fact is that the majority of encounters between Oregon Trail immigrants and indigenous peoples were peaceful. Trade, guidance, and brief exchanges were far more common than violence. Despite popular myths, conflict was relatively rare along most of the trail. The figures approach closer now. Still calm, still unhurried. They don't block the trail. They don't shout. They simply exist alongside it. Part of the land you've been moving through as if it were empty. A woman in your group grips her child's hand a little tighter. A man shifts his rifle on his shoulder. Not raising it, just making sure it's there. The tension is subtle, like a held breath. One of the riders gestures toward the river ahead, speaking in a language you don't understand. Another points to your oxen, then to the grass nearby, miming grazing. The meaning is simple enough. Better pasture that way. Safer crossing this way. Information offered, not demanded. A lesser-known detail from trail accounts is how often indigenous people acted as guides, sometimes formally, sometimes in passing, helping immigrants avoid dangerous crossings, find water, or navigate unfamiliar terrain. This help was frequently taken without acknowledgement in later retellings. Someone offers a small trade, a bit of cloth for dried fish. The exchange happens quickly, efficiently, with polite nods on both sides. No one lingers, no one smiles much either. It's practical, not friendly, but not hostile. You realize something uncomfortable then. You need them more than they need you. They know this land. They know the seasons, the water, the paths that don't appear on your maps. You are passing through with wagons full of fragile plans, while they are standing on ground that has always answered to them. Historians still debate how these encounters shaped immigrant survival rates. Some argue that indigenous assistance saved countless lives, especially early in the journey. Others note that rising traffic, disease, and competition for resources eventually strained these relationships. What's clear is that the simplified narrative of constant danger does not match most first-hand accounts. As the riders move on, melting back into the landscape with a quiet confidence you envy, the tension in camp slowly dissolves. Someone laughs, relieved. Someone else admits they expected something worse. No one says what worse meant. You walk on, thinking about how fear often fills gaps where understanding should be. The trail teaches many lessons, but this one arrives gently. The land was never empty, and you were never its first concern. Later that afternoon, you pass a small cluster of lodges set back from the trail. Smoke rises steadily. Children watch from a distance. Curious and calm, life continues here, parallel to yours, intersecting only briefly before diverging again. A softly modern comparison drifts into your mind. It's like visiting a place you've only seen in headlines and discovering it's full of ordinary people living ordinary lives, untouched by the drama you expected. Camp that night feels lighter, the tension replaced by quiet reflection. You eat a small portion of dried fish, grateful for something different, something that tastes of water and smoke instead of flour and grease. It sits well in your stomach, grounding in a way you didn't realize you needed. As you lie down, listening to the familiar sounds of night, wind, grass, distant animals, you think about how the trail is not just a test of endurance, but of perception. What you fear, what you ignore, what you accept as truth, all of it shapes how you move forward. And as sleep settles in, a calm understanding drifts through your thoughts. Survival out here isn't just about braving the unknown. Sometimes, it's about unlearning what you were told to fear. By now, you've learned not to trust distance. What looks close rarely is. What looks flat usually isn't. And what looks like a clear sign of progress often turns out to be a kind of joke the land plays on anyone foolish enough to measure hope in miles. Someone points ahead in the late morning, excitement slipping into their voice. A formation rises on the horizon, tall, pale shapes catching the light, standing out against the sky like something important. Conversation stirs, steps quicken. Surely that's a landmark. Surely that means something. It does. Just not what you think. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that immigrants relied heavily on visual landmarks, rock formations, bluffs, distant ridges, to gauge progress. Guidebooks promised them, maps marked them, expectations clung to them. The problem was that on the open plains, distance lies. Perspective stretches and compresses in ways the human eye is terrible at correcting. You walk toward the formation for hours. It never seems to get closer in any satisfying way. The shape changes slightly as the angle shifts, revealing itself not as a towering landmark, but as a series of low, uneven outcrops that looked impressive only because the land around them was so relentlessly flat. Someone laughs, embarrassed. Someone swears under their breath. The excitement drains away, replaced by the familiar dull acceptance that progress will not announce itself with drama. A lesser-known detail from immigrant diaries is how often people described chasing landmarks that took far longer to reach than expected. What looked like a half-day's walk sometimes took 2 full days. These misjudgments weren't just disappointing, they disrupted planning, camp locations, water use, and morale. You realize how much you've been leaning on these visual promises. The idea that that thing ahead will mark a chapter's end, a milestone, a sign that you're doing this right. Without them, the journey feels endless in a way that's hard to articulate. By midday, the heat settles in again, and the horizon begins to shimmer. The air bends, lifting shapes that aren't really there, false pools of water, wavering lines that suggest rivers and shade where none exist. Your eyes know better, but part of your brain still reacts. A flicker of hope every time the light shifts just right. A well-known historical event tied to this stage of the trail is the growing frustration with guidebooks that promised accuracy but delivered approximation. Distances were vague, timelines optimistic, advice sometimes dangerously outdated. The land changed faster than ink could keep up. You check the map again. though you already know it won't help much. Lines and labels don't translate cleanly to lived experience. A mile on paper doesn't feel like a mile under the sun. Beside a wagon, with blistered feet and a thinning food supply. Historians still debate how much misinformation immigrants had versus how much they filtered reality through hope. Some argue the information was simply bad. Others suggest people selectively believed what supported their decision to keep going. Either way, the result was the same. Disappointment layered on top of exhaustion. In the afternoon, you finally pass the formation that caught everyone's attention earlier. Up close, it's unremarkable, pale stone. Eroded and uneven, offering no shelter, no water, no sense of achievement. It doesn't mark anything. It doesn't care that you expected it to. Camp that night is set without reference to landmarks at all. The wagons circle where the ground allows it, where water is available, where the animals can graze. The land decides. You simply adapt. As you lie down, staring up at a sky that looks the same no matter how far you've traveled, you feel something shift inside you. Not despair, not optimism, something quieter. Acceptance. The trail is not going to reward you with clear signs of progress. It's not going to congratulate you for enduring. It's just going to keep going. And if you want to survive it, you'll have to learn to do the same. Without waiting for the horizon to tell you when you've earned it. The land dries out before anyone says the word desert. It happens subtly at first. The grass thins. The green dulls into yellow. Then into something closer to dust wearing the memory of plants. Streams grow narrower, slower. Their banks cracked like old pottery. You don't notice the change all at once. You feel it in your mouth. In the way your tongue sticks slightly when you wake. In how often you think about water without realizing you're doing it. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that several stretches, most notoriously the approaches to and crossings of arid regions, pushed emigrants to the edge of dehydration. These weren't endless sand seas, but they were dry enough to turn planning mistakes into emergencies. Water dictated pace now, not daylight. You hear it in the morning discussions. How far to the next reliable source? Whether to travel early or push late. Whether to rest animals in the shade that doesn't really exist or keep moving while the air is still cool. Every option carries risk. Every delay feels expensive. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how often people misjudged water sources listed on maps. Springs dried up. Streams shifted. Ponds turned brackish. What was reliable one season could be useless the next. The trail changed its rules without updating the signs. You set out early, the sky pale and quiet, the sun still low enough to pretend mercy. The ground crunches softly underfoot, each step kicking up a faint puff of dust that settles on your boots like a reminder. Your water container bumps against your hip, its weight both comforting and ominous. By mid-morning, the heat asserts itself, not aggressively, yet, but persistently. It presses against your skin, warming you from the outside in, while the air itself seems to thin. Sweat forms quickly and evaporates just as fast, leaving salt behind, a faint white trace on your clothes and skin. You ration without ceremony now. Sips are measured, mouths are swirled and spat to fake relief. Throats ache quietly, a dry soreness that makes swallowing feel deliberate. Conversation fades, replaced by the sound of boots and wheels and breathing. A well-known historical pattern is that dehydration dulled judgment long before it caused collapse. People grew irritable, then quiet. Small disagreements flared. Decisions slowed. The trail punished dehydration not just through thirst, but through the mistakes it encouraged. You pass a wagon stopped under the thin shadow of its own canvas. The animals stand still, heads low, sides heaving. Someone fans an ox with a hat, the gesture tender and useless. You don't stop long. Stopping means sharing shade, sharing water, sharing risk. By afternoon, the land feels hostile in a way that's hard to define. It's not attacking you. It's simply offering nothing. No shelter, no relief, no clear sign that the effort you're spending is being noticed by anything other than your own body. A lesser-known truth is that some emigrants deliberately traveled at night in these stretches, resting during the day to conserve water and strength. Others avoided night travel entirely, fearing accidents and disorientation. Both strategies worked, until they didn't. Your lips crack, your head throbs faintly, a dull pressure behind the eyes. You try not to think about how far the next water source might actually be. You focus on the next step instead. Then the next. Someone ahead stumbles, catches themselves, laughs too loudly. The sound carries oddly in the dry air. Brittle and short-lived, no one joins in. Historians still debate how many deaths on the trail were directly caused by dehydration versus compounded by it. Thirst weakened bodies, slowed movement, and magnified illness. It rarely arrived alone. It worked in quiet partnership with everything else. Late in the day, a murmur ripples through the line. Water. Not much. Not perfect, but water. A shallow pool sits in a depression ahead, its surface dull, its edges ringed with cracked earth. It's not inviting. It's not clear. It's simply there. People approach carefully, as if it might vanish if startled. Containers are filled slowly. Some boil, some don't. Animals drink first, long and desperate, their relief unmistakable. You take a small sip. The taste is wrong, mineral, stale, but it wets your throat. And that's enough to feel like a gift. You stop there for the night, because moving on would cost more than staying. As darkness settles, the heat releases its grip slowly. Reluctantly, the sky deepens. Stars appear sharp and countless. The air finally cool enough to let your shoulders drop. You lie back, listening to the quiet. A deeper quiet than before. The kind that comes when the land has taken its toll and is done for the moment. Your thoughts drift lazily, heavy with exhaustion. You think about how water, something so ordinary back home, has become the axis everything turns on. You think about how easily comfort becomes necessity, and necessity becomes obsession. As sleep edges in, a calm, Steady understanding settles into place. The desert doesn't need to be dramatic to be dangerous. It just needs time. And out here, time is something you're always spending. Whether you mean to or not, the mountains don't rise suddenly. They announce themselves slowly, like an idea forming at the edge of your thoughts. One morning, the horizon looks different, less flat, more textured. A faint blue line appears where the sky used to meet land without interruption. It's subtle enough that you wonder if you're imagining it. You're not. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that reaching the Rocky Mountains was both a psychological milestone and a logistical shock. For months, the land had been wide and open, demanding endurance more than technique. The mountains demanded something else entirely: strength, timing, and decisions that couldn't be undone easily. At first, the sight lifts spirits. People talk more. Steps feel lighter, even if bodies aren't. The idea of reaching something tangible, something that proves you've come far, acts like a temporary medicine. The mountains feel like progress made visible. A lesser-known detail from immigrant diaries is how misleading this optimism could be. Many wrote about celebrating the first sight of the Rockies, only to later describe the crushing realization that seeing them and crossing them were entirely different problems. The mountains did not mark the end of hardship. They marked a change in its shape. As you draw closer, the air shifts. It's cooler, thinner, carrying the sharp scent of stone and pine instead of dust and dry grass. Your breathing feels different, not harder exactly, but more noticeable, as if your lungs are suddenly aware they're being asked to do something unfamiliar. The trail narrows. Wheels that once rolled freely now bump and jolt over rock and root. Paths twist upward, then back on themselves, forcing wagons into careful, awkward angles. Oxen lean harder into their yokes, muscles trembling as gravity joins the list of things working against you. A well-known historical pattern is that many wagon trains underestimated how much time mountain travel would take. Progress slowed dramatically, miles shrank, days stretched, schedules dissolved into hopeful guesses. You find yourself pushing more often now, boots slipping on loose gravel, hands braced against wood that feels heavier with every incline. The wagon creaks and groans, sounding strained in a way that makes you wince, as if it might simply decide it's done being a wagon today. Someone ahead calls for ropes. Another wagon is being lowered down a steep grade, wheels skidding despite locked brakes. The smell of hot wood and iron hangs in the air. Everyone works carefully, quietly, aware that a single mistake could turn the descent into a disaster. A lesser-known truth is that many wagons were partially dismantled in the mountains, wheels removed, loads split, items carried separately, to get through narrow or steep sections. What you can't adapt, you abandon. The mountains are very clear about that. You stop often, not because you want to, but because animals need it. Oxen breathe heavily, sides heaving, foam gathering at their mouths. Water is offered carefully, shade is rare but treasured. A thin relief beneath pines that smell cool and dark. The weather changes quickly here. Clouds gather without warning. A warm morning can slide into a cold afternoon that bites through damp clothes. You pull layers on and off, never quite comfortable, always reacting. Historians still debate how prepared emigrants truly were for mountain conditions. Some guidebooks mentioned steep grades and narrow passes. Few conveyed the constant, grinding effort required to move wagons through terrain that seemed actively resistant to wheels. By late afternoon, you crest a small rise and pause. Breath-catching. Not from effort this time, but from the view. Valleys stretch below you, ridges layered in fading blue and gray. It's undeniably beautiful, the kind of beauty that makes silence feel appropriate. But beauty doesn't make the path easier. Camp that night is set wherever flat ground can be found, even if it's barely enough for wagons to sit without rolling. Fires burn lower here, wind pulling smoke sideways. The cold settles in early, slipping under clothes and into bones that are already tired. You lie down and feel the day's work echo through your body, arms sore from pushing, legs heavy from climbing, lungs aware of every breath. Sleep comes slower at elevation, lighter and more fragmented. As you drift in and out, a steady realization forms, calm but undeniable. The mountains aren't the final obstacle. They're a reminder that the trail doesn't build toward a single test. It changes the test whenever you start to think you understand it. The cold arrives quietly, almost politely. You notice it first in the morning, when your breath hangs in the air a little longer than it should, and the ground beneath your boots feels stiff, reluctant to give. Summer is still written on the calendar in your mind, but the mountains have their own schedule, and they do not share it. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that elevation rewrote the seasons. Even in midsummer, nights in the mountains could turn bitterly cold. Frost was not unusual. Snow, though rare, was not impossible. Many immigrants were caught off guard by how quickly warmth disappeared once the sun dipped behind ridges. You pull on extra layers, grateful for them, and immediately irritated by how bulky they feel. Clothing here is always either too much or not enough. There's no perfect balance, only constant adjustment. The wagons move slowly through the chill, wheels crunching over gravel and frozen soil. The air smells sharper now, pine, stone, something clean and thin that makes each breath feel more deliberate. Your lungs work harder, not because you're rushing, but because there's simply less to work with. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how many people wrote about shivering in August. The contrast confused them. Summer, in their minds, meant safety from cold. The mountains disagreed. Hypothermia did not care about the month. By midday, the sun warms things just enough to tease you. Coats come off. Sleeves are rolled, sweat forms as you push and pull wagons up inclines, only to cool too quickly when the path levels out. The cycle repeats until you stop noticing it consciously and just accept discomfort as the background state of existence. You cross a small stream fed by snowmelt, its water painfully cold even in daylight. Your fingers go numb almost instantly as you fill a container. You shake your hands afterward. Stinging sensation creeping back slowly. Unpleasant but reassuring. At least you can feel them. A well-known historical pattern is that cold nights worsened illness and injury on the trail. People already weakened by hunger or disease struggled to maintain body heat. Wet clothes from stream crossings or sweat turned dangerous once temperatures dropped. The trail punished exposure ruthlessly. As afternoon fades, clouds gather, thin and fast-moving, brushing shadows across the slopes. The wind picks up, cutting through layers that felt adequate an hour ago. You pull your coat tight and keep walking, knowing that stopping early won't make night arrive any warmer. Camp that evening is tense with preparation. Fires are built larger, closer together. People check blankets, redistribute clothing, make quiet decisions about who needs extra layers most. Children are wrapped tightly, faces flushed from wind and cold. A lesser-known truth is that some immigrants burned valuable items, broken furniture, spare crates, even wagon parts, to stay warm in the mountains. Firewood was not always available, and survival outweighed future plans. You sit close to the fire, hands extended, heat soaking into skin that feels almost hollow with fatigue. Sparks rise into the darkening sky, disappearing quickly in the wind. The mountains loom around you now, silhouettes against a sky turning deep and clear. Historians still debate how much cold exposure contributed to overall trail mortality. It rarely killed outright. Instead, it weakened. It slowed recovery. It turned manageable problems into fatal ones. Like so many hardships here, it worked quietly. When you finally lie down, the ground radiates cold upward, stealing warmth despite blankets and bodies pressed close. Sleep comes in short stretches, broken by shivers and the sound of wind moving through trees high above. As you stare up at the stars, brilliant, sharp, and seemingly closer than before, a calm understanding settles in, steady and unavoidable. Out here, even summer can betray you. The trail doesn't care what season you planned for. It only cares what your body can endure. When the sun goes down, and the cold decides to stay, you've started to measure progress in repairs. Not miles, not landmarks, not even days, just fixes. What broke, how badly, and whether it can be coaxed into working one more time. When the wagon stops now, no one groans. Everyone simply reaches for tools, already guessing what failed this time. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that wagons required near-constant maintenance. Axles overheated, wheels warped, iron fittings loosened or snapped. The terrain, dust, mud, rock, water, worked relentlessly against wood and metal that had never been meant for this kind of punishment. You hear the sound before you see the problem, a sharp knock, uneven and wrong, echoing with each rotation of the wheel. The wagon leans slightly, just enough to make your stomach tighten. Someone calls for a halt, and the line compresses behind you with weary familiarity. The wheel hub is cracked. Not broken clean through, not dramatic, just fractured enough to be dangerous. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how often emigrants attempted temporary repairs that they knew wouldn't last. Rawhide soaked and wrapped tight, grease thickly applied, wooden wedges hammered in with hope rather than confidence. These fixes weren't meant to solve the problem, just delay it. You crouch beside the wheel, hands already blackened with grease. The smell sharp and familiar. The wood is warm from friction. The crack faint but unmistakable. Someone suggests replacing the wheel. Someone else shakes their head. The spare was used weeks ago. This is the wheel you have. So you improvise. Rawhide is soaked in water, then stretched tight around the hub, binding the crack like a tourniquet. As it dries, it shrinks, pulling the wood together with stubborn force. It's clever, it's traditional, it's temporary. While you work, the sun moves, shadows shift, the day waits, indifferent to your problem. Every minute spent stopped is a minute not spent moving. And that calculation presses against everyone's patience. Historians still debate how much mechanical failure slowed overall migration compared to illness and weather. Some argue breakdowns were minor inconveniences. Others note that delays compounded everything else. Missed seasonal windows, stretched supplies, exhausted animals. The wagon was not just transport. It was survival infrastructure. The repair holds. For now. You stand, wiping your hands on already ruined cloth, and help lever the wagon back into motion. The wheel turns. The knock is softer, but it's still there. A reminder with every rotation that this fix has an expiration date. The trail resumes its steady demand. By afternoon, another stop, a loose bolt, a cracked tongue, a wheel rim that's begun to separate from its spokes. Each issue on its own is manageable. Together, they feel relentless, like the trail is testing how many problems you can solve before you simply run out of solutions. A softly modern comparison drifts through your mind. It's like driving a car that constantly flashes warning lights. Except there's no mechanic, no parts store, and pulling over too often might cost you the road itself. Camp that night forms later than planned. Everyone is tired in a deeper way now, not just physically, but mentally. Fixing things takes focus. Focus drains faster than strength. The fires burn low as people collapse into rest. Tools left out. Repairs half finished until morning. You sit and inspect your hands by firelight. Small cuts, embedded splinters, grease worked into skin that no longer feels entirely yours. You flex your fingers slowly, grateful they still respond. A lesser-known truth is that many immigrants develop long-term injuries from constant manual repairs, strained joints, crushed fingers, chronic pain that didn't announce itself until years later. The trail left marks that weren't visible in graves or records. As you lie down, the sound of the wagon's uneven wheel echoes in your memory. Rhythmic and unsettling. You know you'll hear it again tomorrow. And the next day, until something gives. Sleep comes, but lightly. And in the quiet between breaths, One calm realization settles in, steady as the stars above. On the Oregon Trail, nothing breaks all at once. It frays. And survival means learning how to live inside that fraying. Tightening, patching, and moving forward. One imperfect repair at a time. Leadership becomes visible when it starts to fail. Up until now, decisions have flowed easily enough. When to start, when to stop, which side of a river looks safer, who walks where. They felt shared, almost natural, like the trail itself was guiding you through small, manageable choices. Lately, though, every decision feels heavier, as if the weight of past mistakes has begun to stack on top of each new one. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that most wagon trains were loosely organized, with leaders chosen informally or rotating responsibilities shared among adults. This worked well when conditions were mild. Under stress, short supplies, illness, broken equipment, it worked less well. You feel that shift now. Someone suggests pushing farther today to make up for lost time. Someone else insists the animals need rest. A third voice quietly reminds everyone how low the water barrels are. The discussion stretches longer than it should, circling the same points without resolution. No one wants to be the person who chooses wrong. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how often leadership disputes ended not with shouting, but with quiet division. Wagons would simply drift apart, one group pushing ahead, another slowing down, each convinced their choice was the safer one. Unity eroded not through conflict, but through exhaustion. You walk beside the wagon and listen to the conversation break into smaller ones. Advice is repeated, warnings are softened, people stop looking at each other and start looking at the ground. This is what indecision looks like out here, not dramatic, just draining. By midday, the choice is made to keep the pace moderate. A compromise that satisfies no one completely. You move forward anyway, because motion itself has become the only point of agreement. The sun presses down, not brutally, but insistently. Heat mixes with tension in a way that makes tempers thin. A snapped rope leads to a sharper comment than necessary. Someone takes an extra moment to drink and is quietly judged for it. These are small things. They feel large. A well-known historical pattern is that internal conflict increased later in the journey, when fatigue and scarcity made cooperation harder. The trail didn't just test bodies, it tested trust. You catch yourself resenting someone else's decision, then immediately feel guilty about it. You're all tired. You're all afraid. No one is hoarding comfort. There isn't any to hoard. At a brief stop, two voices rise slightly over a disagreement about route choice. Not shouting, just firm, clipped words. Others drift closer, pretending not to listen. The argument resolves without conclusion. One person walks away. The other tightens a strap too aggressively. Historians still debate how leadership dynamics affected survival rates on the trail. Some argue strong, decisive leaders kept groups moving and focused. Others note that rigid leadership could be just as dangerous. pushing people into bad weather or risky crossings. Flexibility mattered, but so did confidence. Finding both in one person was rare. As afternoon wears on, the group spreads out a little more than usual. The wagon ahead pulls farther away. The one behind lags. No one says anything, but the space between feels intentional, like a quiet experiment in independence. Camp that evening is less cohesive. Fires are built farther apart. Conversations stay within smaller circles. The shared rhythm of earlier days feels fractured, replaced by parallel routines that barely overlap. You eat with your group, not the whole train, and notice how quickly this new normal settles in. As darkness falls, you lie awake longer than usual, listening to the night sounds, wind, distant animal calls, the occasional creak of wood as wagons settle. The quiet feels different now, stretched thin by unspoken tension. You think about how leadership isn't just about choosing a direction. It's about holding people together while choosing. And as sleep finally edges in, a steady, thoughtful realization settles into place. On the trail, disagreements don't need to explode to be dangerous. Sometimes, all it takes is everyone walking forward, slightly apart, convinced they're doing the right thing, and quietly hoping the others are wrong. There is no doctor on the trail. You've known this since the beginning, of course. In the abstract way, you know many unpleasant things before they become personal. Now it settles in more firmly. With weight and shape, illness doesn't announce itself with a clear diagnosis. It arrives as a collection of symptoms, guesses, and quiet worry, and then asks you to solve it with whatever happens to be on hand. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that trained physicians were rare among immigrants. Most medical care fell to whoever had the most experience, the steadiest hands, or the loudest confidence. Knowledge came from family tradition, hearsay, or pamphlets that simplified complex problems into hopeful instructions. You see it play out in the afternoon. A woman sits on a crate, face pale, eyes unfocused. She's been feverish since morning, skin hot and dry despite the cool air. Someone brings her water. Someone else insists she shouldn't drink too much. A third offers a spoonful of something bitter-smelling, swearing it helped their cousin back east. No one is certain. Everyone is trying. A lesser-known detail from trail journals is how often people relied on treatments that today sound alarming: mercury compounds, alcohol, bloodletting, herbal mixtures of questionable safety. These weren't acts of ignorance so much as acts of desperation. When doing nothing felt worse than doing something, almost anything became acceptable. You watch as the woman swallows the offered remedy, grimacing. You hope it helps. You also quietly hope it doesn't make things worse. Both hopes feel equally fragile. Later, a child develops a cough that rattles too deeply for comfort. The sound echoes at night, sharp and insistent, impossible to ignore. Someone suggests warm compresses. Someone else suggests prayer. The fire is built a little higher, and the child is wrapped in every spare blanket that can be found. A well-known historical pattern is that sickness on the trail rarely stayed isolated. Crowded camps, shared water sources, and close quarters allowed illness to move easily between people. Avoidance was difficult. Compassion made distance feel cruel. Historians still debate how effective folk medicine was on the trail. Some remedies likely offered genuine relief, rest, warmth, hydration. Others may have hastened decline. Without controlled knowledge, outcomes varied wildly, reinforcing the belief that illness followed fate more than cause. You think about how different this would feel if there were clear instructions. If someone could say, "This is what's wrong. This is how long it will last. This is what you do." Instead, every decision feels like a guess made under pressure. By evening, the woman's fever breaks slightly. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to breathe easier. The child's cough softens as the night deepens. Relief moves through the camp in quiet ways, slower movements, deeper breaths, less watching. But you also know this doesn't mean safety. Tomorrow could reverse everything. You lie down and listen to the sounds of sleep settling around you, uneven breathing. The crackle of dying fire. The distant murmur of wind through grass. Your own body feels strangely foreign now, like something you're responsible for maintaining without a manual. A softly modern comparison drifts through your thoughts. It's like losing access to every search engine, every instruction video, every second opinion. Except the stakes aren't inconvenience. They're survival. As sleep approaches, a calm, sober realization settles in. Out here, sickness isn't just a physical condition. It's an uncertainty. And without doctors, without answers, you don't fight illness with cures. You fight it with hope, patience, and the quiet agreement to keep going. Unless the body absolutely refuses. The weariness settles in quietly, then refuses to leave. It's not the sharp exhaustion of a hard day or the clean tiredness that comes with honest work. This is something softer, heavier, a mental fog that wraps around your thoughts and dulls their edges. You wake already tired. You go to sleep still carrying the day with you. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that prolonged travel took a severe psychological toll. Months of routine, stress, loss, and uncertainty eroded morale in ways that weren't always visible. People didn't just wear out physically. They wore thin. You notice it in the silences. Conversations don't stretch the way they used to. Laughter, when it happens, feels deliberate, almost rehearsed. People speak in practical statements now. What needs doing? What's missing? What's next? There's little energy left for speculation or storytelling. A lesser-known detail from Emigrant Diaries is how often writers mentioned feeling empty or numb rather than afraid. Fear is loud. Numbness is efficient. It lets you keep walking without asking too many questions about why. You walk beside the wagon and let your thoughts drift. Then realize you've been staring at the same patch of ground for far too long. The trail narrows your focus like that. Past and future blur. Everything compresses into the next step, the next breath, the next small task that proves you're still participating. Someone ahead hums softly, a tune you don't recognize. It stops abruptly, as if they forgot why they started. Someone else snaps at a child for lagging, then apologizes too quickly. Emotions misfire here, arriving late or leaving early. A well-known historical pattern is that mental fatigue increased the likelihood of mistakes, missed turns, poor camp placement, careless handling of tools. The mind, like the body, made compromises when pushed too long without rest. You feel that compromise in yourself. You forget where you put something, then find it in your hand. You misjudge a step and stumble, catching yourself just in time. Nothing serious happens, but each near miss feels like a warning you don't quite have the energy to interpret. Historians still debate how emigrants maintained motivation over such long journeys. Some point to faith, others to community. Many conclude that habit did most of the work. Once the journey became routine, stopping felt stranger than continuing. In the afternoon, the sky stretches wide and empty, and the land offers nothing new to look at. Your mind begins to replay fragments instead, memories of home, meals that no longer exist, conversations that feel unreal now. They drift in and out, uninvited but oddly comforting. Camp that night forms almost automatically. Everyone moves through familiar motions without much discussion. Fires are built, food is prepared. The day is closed out like a book no one is eager to reread. You lie down and stare at the dark, listening to the low murmur of sleep around you. The stars feel distant tonight, less sharp, as if even they are tired of watching. As your thoughts slow, a steady realization settles in, gentle but firm. The trail doesn't just challenge your strength. It asks you to keep caring. About direction, about safety, about each other. Long after caring starts to feel like work. And surviving it means learning how to rest your mind, even when your body can't stop moving. The shortcut sounds reasonable. It's mentioned casually at first, like an aside. Someone heard about it from a traveler heading east. Someone else saw it marked faintly on a map that's already proven unreliable. The promise is always the same: fewer miles, faster progress, a way around the worst of what lies ahead. You've learned enough by now to be suspicious. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that shortcuts killed people. The most infamous alternatives, like certain cutoffs through harsher terrain, were taken in hopes of saving time or supplies, and instead delivered isolation, scarcity, and death. The trail punished impatience with remarkable consistency. The discussion grows. Someone argues that staying on the main route guarantees only more of the same, slow progress. Dwindling food, exhausted animals. Someone else counters that the main trail is known, worn, tested by thousands before you. The shortcut is a gamble, but so is everything else. A lesser-known detail from emigrant accounts is how persuasive these alternate routes could sound. Especially late in the journey, fatigue made risk feel acceptable. Desperation reframed danger as opportunity. When you're already struggling, the idea of less struggle, even if uncertain, has a powerful pull. You look at the faces around you and see the calculation happening. Not excitement, not recklessness, just quiet math, miles versus meals, time versus strength, hope versus habit. Historians still debate why so many intelligent, capable people chose dangerous cutoffs despite warnings. Some blame poor information, others point to social pressure. No one wanted to be the group that turned back from a chance at improvement. The trail, once again, made human psychology part of the hazard. The decision is made, not unanimously, but firmly enough to move. The wagons turn away from the well-worn ruts and onto ground that looks less certain, grass flattened only occasionally, soil less compacted, signs of passage faint and inconsistent. The landscape feels wider somehow, emptier. The silence deepens. At first, it's fine. The land rolls gently, the pace improves, spirits lift just a little. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to feel justified. Someone even jokes about making up lost time. It lands flat, but no one minds. By the second day, the problems start. The path fades more often than it appears. You stop to debate direction, scanning for landmarks that don't match the map's suggestions. Water sources are farther apart than expected. The grass thins again, and animals graze longer, pulling precious minutes from daylight. A well-known historical pattern is that cutoffs often compounded small uncertainties into serious problems. A missed turn became a lost day. A dry spring became a forced march. Isolation magnified every mistake. By the third day, tension returns, sharper this time. Supplies dip lower than planned. People ration more aggressively. The jokes stop entirely. The land offers no reassurance. No sign that this route is leading anywhere recognizable. Even the sky feels indifferent, vast and empty above you. A lesser-known truth is that many cut-off travelers realized their mistake early but felt unable to turn back. Pride, sunk costs, and fear of wasted effort pushed them forward, even when retreat might have been safer. Momentum became its own trap. When you finally reconnect with the main trail, days later than hoped, more worn than before, the relief is complicated. You're glad to see familiar ruts. You're also aware of what it cost to leave them. Camp that night is quiet. No one says, "I told you so." No one needs to. The lesson is written in thinner faces, slower movements, and the careful way people now discuss any deviation from the known path. As you lie down, listening to the familiar sounds of the main trail settling around you, a calm, hard-earned understanding settles in. On the Oregon Trail, the worst dangers often arrive disguised as solutions. And sometimes, surviving means accepting that the long way, the boring way, the way everyone else already walked, wasn't foolish after all. Starvation doesn't arrive the way you expect. There's no dramatic collapse, no sudden moment where food simply ends. Instead, it creeps in quietly, disguising itself as efficiency. Meals shrink. Recipes simplify. What used to be dinner becomes sustenance. And then becomes routine. You eat because it's time to eat, not because your body feels satisfied. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that many immigrants reached the final third of the journey already undernourished. Even those who started well-supplied often arrived near Oregon with empty barrels and thinner bodies. Their margins erased by delay, loss, and miscalculation. You feel it first in your energy. Walking takes more effort now. Not dramatically more, just enough that you notice. Pushing the wagon feels heavier. Like gravity has quietly increased overnight. Your thoughts drift more often. Not to memories, but to food. Specific food. Bread with texture. Fruit that drips when you bite it. You catch yourself planning imaginary meals. Then feel faintly embarrassed, as if you've been caught wasting time. A lesser-known detail from immigrant diaries is how many people described hunger as a constant background noise rather than a sharp pain. The stomach adapts. The mind does not. Hunger becomes a steady companion, shaping mood and decision-making even when you think you're ignoring it. By midday, you notice how thin everyone looks. Cheeks are sharper, clothes hang looser, belts have been tightened one notch too many. Children move more slowly, conserving energy without being told. Adults talk less, saving breath and words as if both are limited resources. A well-known historical pattern is that starvation rarely killed outright on the trail. Instead, it weakened people until something else finished the job: illness, exposure, injury. Hunger was patient. It didn't rush. At a brief stop, someone suggests killing an animal. The idea lands heavily. Oxen are precious. Horses are transport. Dogs are companions. But desperation reframes ethics quickly. The suggestion isn't made lightly. And it isn't dismissed immediately either. It hangs there, uncomfortable and unresolved. A lesser-known truth is that some immigrants did slaughter draft animals late in the journey, trading future mobility for immediate survival. It was a decision that saved lives in the short term and doomed others soon after. The trail forced choices with no clean outcomes. You eat that evening in near silence. The portion is small enough to feel symbolic. You chew slowly, trying to trick your body into thinking it's getting more than it is. It doesn't work. The hunger remains, calm and observant, like it's taking notes. Historians still debate how close most immigrants came to actual starvation. Records are inconsistent. Some downplayed suffering. Others emphasized it. What's clear is that many arrived in Oregon malnourished, exhausted, and one bad day away from collapse. You lie down early, not because you're tired, but because being still makes hunger easier to manage. Moving reminds your body of what it lacks. Stillness lets the ache blur into the background. As night settles in, you listen to the soft sounds of breathing around you, slower and shallower than before. The stars overhead feel distant, almost irrelevant. Your world has shrunk to something very small and very immediate. And as sleep finally edges closer, a quiet, sobering understanding settles in. Near the end of the trail, hunger isn't a crisis. It's a condition. One you carry with you, mile after mile, hoping the finish line arrives. Before the bill comes due, you expect relief to arrive with the landscape. That's the quiet promise you've been carrying for weeks, that once the terrain softens, once the air smells different, once the mountains loosen their grip, something inside you will finally unclench. You imagine a moment where you'll feel that you're almost there. It doesn't happen. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that arrival did not equal recovery. Many immigrants reached the Willamette Valley physically depleted, emotionally flattened, and far less triumphant than popular stories later suggested. The land might change, but the body keeps its own record. The hills roll more gently now. Trees grow thicker, greener. Water appears more often, moving with a confidence you almost resent after months of rationing every sip. Objectively, this is the place you've been moving toward. Subjectively, you feel hollow. Walking still hurts. Hunger still lingers. Your joints ache in ways that don't match the effort you're giving anymore. Even rest doesn't feel restorative. It just pauses the damage. A lesser-known detail from immigrant accounts is how many people described feeling disconnected during this phase, like they were watching themselves arrive instead of experiencing it. The mind, stretched thin for so long, didn't immediately understand that the danger had changed. You notice it in yourself. Someone points out fertile ground, rich soil that promises crops and stability. You nod, but the excitement feels theoretical. Someone else talks about building, planting, staying. The words float past you. Ideas meant for a future you can't quite picture yet. A well-known historical pattern is that many immigrants required weeks or months to physically recover after arrival, if they recovered at all. Malnutrition, untreated injuries, chronic illness followed them into settlement life. The trail didn't end cleanly. It bled into what came next. Camp that night feels different. Not easier, just quieter. There's less urgency in the movements, but also less energy. People sit longer, stare more, fires burn lower, not because fuel is scarce, but because no one feels like tending them. The routine that kept you alive now lacks a clear purpose. Historians still debate how many immigrants felt disappointment upon arrival. Some records describe joy and gratitude. Others reveal a strange emptiness, a sense that the journey took more than it gave. Both can be true at once. You lie down and listen to the sounds around you. Night insects, water moving nearby, the steady breathing of people who have made it this far. The land feels calmer, safer. You don't. And that realization lands gently, without panic. Survival, your learning, doesn't end when the danger does. It lingers in the body. In the habits you can't drop. In the way you still count supplies. Still scan the ground. Still wake at every unfamiliar sound. As sleep comes, slow and shallow, one steady thought drifts through your mind. Reaching the end of the trail doesn't mean the trail is done with you. It just means the walking has stopped, and the remembering is about to begin. The counting happens without ceremony. No one announces it. No one gathers everyone together and makes a list. It unfolds quietly, in fragments. When you notice an empty space where a wagon used to be. When you realize you haven't heard a certain voice in days. When you try to picture the group as it once was and can't quite reconstruct it. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that many emigrants only fully grasped their losses after arrival. During the journey, survival demanded forward motion. Reflection was postponed. Now, with the pace slowed, absence becomes visible. You start doing the math in your head. That family who turned back after the river. The man buried near the plains. His grave marked with a board that leaned too much to last. The child who fell ill and never quite recovered. The oxen that collapsed. The wagons abandoned. The people who chose a different route and never rejoined. They don't form a single list. They appear as interruptions. You'll be talking, and suddenly realize someone should be there. Nodding along, making a familiar comment. You'll hear a laugh that sounds close enough to remind you of another. Now gone. The mind fills gaps before it accepts them. A lesser-known detail from emigrant accounts is how rarely people held formal memorials for those lost on the trail. There was no time, no energy, and often no body. Grief became something private, folded into daily tasks, carried quietly rather than displayed. You feel that quiet now. There's no overwhelming sadness. Not exactly. It's more like a low pressure in the chest. A constant awareness that the group you arrived with is not the group you left with. Survival has thinned it, reshaped it, chosen who remains without explanation. A well-known historical pattern is that immigrant narratives often simplified these losses later, compressing them into numbers or anecdotes. We lost a few along the way. The phrase sounds small. It isn't. Historians still debate how people psychologically processed this kind of cumulative loss. Some suggest emotional suppression was necessary for function. Others argue that delayed grief emerged years later. Once safety allowed memory to surface. The trail didn't offer space to mourn. It demanded endurance instead. That evening, you sit near the edge of camp and watch the light fade over unfamiliar land that is supposed to be home. The air smells rich, alive, full of promise. You notice how many people sit alone now, even when others are nearby. You think about how survival is often framed as a victory. But victories usually include celebration. This feels more like inventory. You lie down and stare into the dark, letting the day replay itself, not the walking, not the work, but the faces, the ones still here, the ones that aren't. You don't try to force emotion. You just let the awareness exist. And as sleep finally arrives, slow and gentle, one steady understanding settles in. Making it to the end doesn't mean everyone did. And part of surviving the trail, the part no one prepares you for, is learning how to carry the weight of who's missing, without letting it pull you backward, or stop you from standing up tomorrow. The story is already changing. You hear it in the way people talk now. About the trail. About what we went through. About how hard it was. The words are the same. But the tone is different. Edges are softened. Events are grouped together. Simplified. Shaped into something that sounds survivable when spoken out loud. A well-known historical reality of the Oregon Trail is that it became legend almost immediately. Letters sent back east, newspaper accounts, later memoirs, all compressed months of hardship into narratives of perseverance and opportunity. Suffering was acknowledged, but often smoothed into something inspirational. You catch yourself doing it too. When someone asks about the worst part, you hesitate. There are too many answers. Cholera, hunger, the graves, the cold, the arguments. Instead, you choose one. You make it manageable. You make it tellable. A lesser-known detail from emigrant writings is how much was left out intentionally. Not lies, just omissions. The boredom, the numbness, the slow erosion of certainty. Those things were harder to explain. And harder to relive. You walk through what will become your new surroundings. Noticing how ordinary life is already trying to resume. Tools are unpacked. Ground is tested. Plans are spoken aloud with cautious optimism. The future is being assembled from pieces that survived the journey. A well-known historical pattern is that later generations often misunderstood the trail by focusing on endpoints rather than processes. They learned where people started and where they ended, but not what it felt like to exist in between for months at a time. Historians still debate how much the Oregon Trail myth shaped American identity, whether it celebrated resilience or erased cost. Probably both. The legend needed heroes. The reality involved people who were just tired, hungry, and trying not to quit. That night, you sit quietly and listen to stories being told nearby. They're already cleaner than your memories. Funny in places. Triumphant in others. You don't interrupt. Stories evolve like this for a reason. They make survival easier to live with. You lie down and let the voices fade. The land settling into its new role as background rather than obstacle. Your body still aches. Your habits are still sharp. But something has shifted. You are no longer on the trail. You are after it. And as sleep pulls you under, a calm realization settles in. Steady and almost gentle. History doesn't remember how tired you were. It remembers that you arrived. Everything else, the fear, the doubt, the quiet endurance, lives only in the people who walked it, and in the spaces between the stories they choose to tell. The nights grow quieter in a different way now. Not the alert quiet of the trail, where every sound meant something and sleep was always half listening. This quiet is wider, softer, almost unfamiliar. The land no longer presses against you with questions. It simply exists, and for the first time in months, it allows you to exist too. You lie still longer before moving in the mornings. No one urges haste. No wagon creaks impatiently. No animal stamps, waiting to be harnessed. The rhythm that ruled your body for so long has loosened its grip. And the absence of it feels strange. like stepping off a moving surface and needing a moment to trust that the ground is steady. A well-known historical reality is that the end of the Oregon Trail marked not triumph, but transition. Settlement life demanded its own endurance. Clearing land, building shelter, surviving winter. None of it was easy. But it was different. The danger no longer followed you step by step. You feel that difference most clearly at night. When you close your eyes, the trail still appears at first, dust, ruts, endless horizon. But it fades more quickly now. The images soften, sounds blur, the urgency drains away, leaving only fragments, like impressions pressed into memory rather than warnings demanding attention. Historians still debate how long the trail stayed with those who walked it. Some accounts suggest years, others imply a lifetime, but many agree on this. The journey reshaped how people understood comfort, scarcity, and resilience. After the trail, ordinary hardship never looked quite the same. You breathe slowly, deeply, feeling how the air fills your chest without effort. Your body is still worn. Hunger still echoes faintly, but for the first time, rest feels possible. Not just stopping, but recovering. The land outside is quiet and dark, but not threatening. The stars feel distant again, where they belong. The wind moves gently, no longer carrying urgency in its voice. Your thoughts slow. The miles no longer need counting. The supplies no longer need guarding. The trail loosens its hold, not all at once, but kindly, memory by memory, habit by habit. And as sleep finally deepens, warm and unforced, the last thought drifts through your mind, soft as breath. You made it. Not untouched, not unchanged, but here. Now let the darkness blur. Let the road fade. Let the long walking settle into rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.